It's me again, and today I'm going to talk about one of the peer-to-peer protocols in lib P2P. This has got nothing to do with measurements or any of that that I talked about yesterday, and it's about Gossipsub. It's about a peer-to-peer protocol that is being used by the Filecoin blockchain, and not only, it's being used by other blockchains in the Web3 space. We do have an extensive paper where more than what I'm going to talk about is in there. Very detailed. If you're interested in the details, I highly recommend that. Gossipsub, of course, has been existed before the work that I'm going to present today. But then with the collaboration of these great individuals there, what we did is that we added some features to make it more secure. And this is needed for several reasons. If we talk about message propagation in blockchain environments, we understand that there is some monetary value that is getting into the picture, and the pubsub protocol is a fundamental part of the network in that respect. So what is Gossipsub and pubsub protocols used for? They're used in blockchain environments for to transfer transaction messages and block messages between different peers in the network, between storage providers in the Filecoin blockchain, between other types of miners in other blockchains. As we also know, those networks are permissionless, which means that anyone can join, anyone can try to disrupt the operation of the network, and that directly means there is going to be some monetary value loss by the attacked, like by the rest of the peers in the network. There are some targets for a pubsub protocol in such environments. It needs to avoid network fragmentation and forks, because in this way, if we have network fragmentation, that not everyone in the network, not every peer in the network is seeing the same state, and therefore we have forks and people see different things, and the world blows apart basically. There needs to be verification and consensus, so this is used by blockchains like natively. And as I mentioned before, nodes need to be in sync, right? So they need to have the same view of the world. So you need a protocol to transfer around messages to all nodes so that everyone has got the same view of the kind of distributed database. So for Filecoin in specific, what is happening is that once storage providers produce a new block, this new block needs to be propagated to everyone else, every other peer in the network, every other storage provider in this case, within 6 seconds. So this is a deadline that has been put for other reasons that we're not interested in right now, but you can think about it as a deadline where a miner, a storage provider, when they produce a new block, everyone in the network needs to be made aware of that. Like the pubsub protocol needs to transfer that message to everyone in the network within 6 seconds. And then there are some other processes that take place internally, and within 30 seconds, so 6 plus another 24, within 30 seconds, then it's the next period that the next block or set of blocks in Filecoin are being produced. Right, so this is a deadline. We need to catch it. That's the takeaway point. Whatever graph you'll see, it needs to be within 6 seconds. So what we did, what was the target of this study? So we had the pubsub protocol. It was performing pretty well. The Gossipsub protocol. We wanted to test against those attacks, right? So we wanted to make the Filecoin blockchain and any other blockchain network that is using Gossipsub resilient against those attacks. I'm going to go into detail into each one of them, but later on in the results. But very briefly, I mean, these are pretty well known. Sybil attack. Anyone can spin up thousands of nodes or tens of thousands of nodes and pretend that they are honest players in the game while they're not. And that's the first step. Pretty much every other attack needs to have Sybils in the network. The Eclipse attack is when you have those Sybils and you basically act as a sink. You receive messages from others, but you don't propagate. So that means that basically the network goes silent, because if you have lots of Sybil attacks, lots of Sybils, where the ratio would be, I don't know, 20 or 50 or 100 to 1 honest node, then you're only connected to Sybils, and it's very difficult to propagate any other message in the network. And so on and so forth. I'll mention the rest of them later, but you get the feeling of what we're trying to avoid here. Now, Gossipsub, I'm going to give a brief description of Gossipsub. Some of you might know it. It's pretty simple, but at the same time, it's got several components that sometimes confuse people, so maybe we can try and do a good job of explaining what it's all about. So in Gossipsub, the main thing is the global mesh. Everyone is connected to some other nodes, and progressively, because others are also connected to others, as in every pubsub system, messages get propagated through the network. So you can think of that as the global mesh is every circle that you see in this graph. Then we have the local mesh, which is that every node in the network, say node A here, is directly connected to a number of other nodes. In this case, it's D equal 5, right? And then, of course, every node like this has got direct connections to others. These other nodes also have direct connections to others, and every node is kind of building its own little cloud like that, okay? And they try to have a relatively stable number of directly connected peers. Then you have other peers that in this figure are not connected to anyone. They don't have a local mesh. It can be the case, although most nodes, unless they're misbehaving, as we're going to see, are connected to a number of other nodes. And this, we're displaying this here in order to explain the gossiping. So, from a topology perspective, this is what is happening, and then there are three main types of messages: is grafting, pruning, and pruning with peer exchange, which we're not going to cover here. So what is happening is that grafting, what does it mean? We said there is this D value, which was equal to 5 for that node A there. So if this is a fixed value for the protocol, and everyone is trying to keep around that number of peers connected to them. So if you fall below that, you need to go and find more nodes. If a node goes offline, if you prune it for some reason, if whatever, the node leaves the network, you need to go and graft and connect to other nodes. So this is one type of operation that is happening. Then it's the opposite, then it's pruning. If you end up being connected to more than D equal 5, in that case, nodes, you need to prune down some of them, right? So that you keep there, you don't always go and increase the number. So you try to keep between these, and then there are two thresholds I forgot to mention. There is the D high and the D low. Yeah, pretty clear what it means when you always need to be. I think these are the standard parameters that are kind of hard-coded in the protocol, and you need to keep around D equal 8. You might go a little bit up or a little bit down, but you always need to be between those thresholds and keep as close to the optimal value as possible. Now, these are happening in every heartbeat period, which is happening every 1 second. Basically, every node every 1 second is checking how many connections they have, they're grafting or pruning, and they're doing some other things as well that we're going to see in a minute. So then, okay, gossip. So what is happening? More generally, message propagation. So in the immediate local mesh of a node, messages are propagated directly. So I am connected to D equal 8 other nodes. If I receive a message, or if I publish a message myself, I send it immediately to all other nodes, okay? So I push the message, even if we assume that this is directly my mesh or the mesh of other nodes, a message is produced here, it's going to be pushed to everyone. Nodes might receive duplicate messages, so these gray lines here mean that this message has been received twice, one from the original publisher and once more through this other node. That's fine. It's not a problem. These things happen in pubsub networks. And then everything, like at every heartbeat, every node is picking randomly some nodes outside its local mesh, to which is sending what we call gossip, right? So this is the gossip part. What this tries to do is have a kind of combination of eager push and lazy pull, as it's called, so that you achieve a balance between, not flooding the network and not adding too much traffic into the network, but at the same time have as much outreach as possible. So it's all about a trade-off, obviously, and here we see, like, if we increase the mesh degree too much and therefore start getting connected to many, many nodes where we like push the new messages that we produce or receive from others, then we obviously we have lower latency, but we have increased bandwidth and other overhead from in the network and the nodes. Yeah, and then if we, on the other hand, in lazy pool, what is lazy pool is that for those nodes that we gossip to, we don't basically send the entire message, but only the message header is sent. If that node sees that they don't have the message, they don't recognize the header that they have just received, they go back to the node that gossip the message. So in this case, and say, okay, send me the full message because I don't have it. I don't recognize this header, right? So this is the lazy pull where it comes from. It's pulling the message. It's initially only hearing the header of the message. Right, so with this, like this is kind of from a simulation, a comparison. Like if these blue guys here, blue and red guys, are all the nodes in the network. If you had flooding, it would be something like that. If you had Gossipsub, it would be something like that. And like in this particular case, the message propagation happens like messages propagate to all of the nodes. Right, so that's the base protocol. What we did is we added a score function to make it more secure against the types of attacks that I mentioned before. And what this score function looks like, it's a weighted sum of a number of different parameters where we thought that these could be kind of threat vectors in a peer-to-peer network, right? So one of them is the time, like the uptime and the amount of time that a node has been already in the network, because the longer a node lives, the more like is in the network, the higher the chances that it is an honest node. Normally, an attacker would be, for an attacker, it would cost a lot of money to, put in the network like 100 times or 1,000 times more peers than the size of the network, so that you have a Sybil-occupied network, and therefore that would cost money. So what attackers would normally do is that they would, get in the network, attack the network, and like get what they want and leave, right? So the more time they are in the network, the better. The P2 parameter is first message deliveries. So if you hear, like the more times you hear a message or you receive a message from a node, the higher the chances that this node is not misbehaving, is not delaying messages. So they receive a message, they send it directly to you. And that's a good sign that the node is doing its best to propagate messages as fast as possible. Then there are other negative parameters such as P4, the invalid messages. So if I receive an invalid message from someone, this is a bad sign. I'm not directly rejecting this node, but if a node is starts to send too many invalid messages, then maybe this is a sign that is trying to overload other peers in the network with like having them process messages and so on. So this is not a good sign if someone is spamming the network with rubbish. Then there are application-specific, like P5 is an application-specific parameter, which means that an application can use that for its own purposes. So, okay, here blockchains, and the Filecoin blockchain is one, but of course this is a protocol that is used by others as well. And then the P6 parameter is the IP address collocation. You don't want, like, basically identify if someone is spinning up very many VMs in the same machine or in the same data center or whatever, and trying to Sybil the network and attack the network from the same IP. So that's another thing to take into account. So simplistically, this is the score function. Every peer is keeping a score for every other peer it is connected to, right? So this is a little bit important to understand. Scores of peers are not shared between peers. So this is not a reputation system. It's just a score that, you know, I measure basically each one of these parameters for every other peer that I know of, or I have heard of, or I'm connected to in the peer-to-peer network. And what I use it for is that when these score drop, I'm trying to keep connections with the peers that are for which I have the highest score, right? So I basically observe all the peers, and I have a score for each one of the peers that I see or I'm connected to. I try to keep my connections or to graft to new peers for those that have the highest score, in my opinion, according to my view, right? And I prune the rest. So if someone starts misbehaving, the score value is going to go down. So in the next heartbeat, I'm going to prune that connection because I believe that this node is not behaving correctly, right? So that's the whole kind of point behind this score function. So the mitigation strategies, quickly. So the controlled mesh maintenance is basically what I have just mentioned. I'm keeping a score for every other peer. I try to be connected with those that have the highest score, in my opinion. Then there is flood publishing, which means that the first message is flooded actually to the network, and this is very kind of adjusted for a blockchain environment because blocks are very important. So when I first produce a message, I flood it to everyone I know, and then from then on, as a second step to avoid having too much traffic in the network, all other nodes follow what I mentioned before. They flood their own local mesh, so 8 nodes or around that number, and they gossip to other nodes further away. And there are some other mitigation strategies, such as the back off on prune, for example. If I see that for a peer I have a low score function, I believe that this peer should be excluded, is misbehaving, and the back off here means that I don't accept connections again from the same peer for some period of time, right? So because if I prune a misbehaving node, the node is most likely going to try and come back to me and connect to me again. So with this back off, I'm not going to accept the connection for the next X minutes. So we used testground to do some extensive measurements. We have simulated the setup we had in total, I think, 5,000 peers, if I remember correctly. This is the total number, and it includes a ratio of 1 to 20 honest peers to attackers. The metrics that we used were 6 seconds as a kind of hard deadline to get messages propagated, even if the network is under attack. We should have 0 packet loss because all peers need to receive the messages in any case. And then we compared against the Bitcoin equivalent of the pubsub protocol and Ethereum 1, the Ethereum 1 equivalent. So in the Bitcoin case, every node is pretty much flooding the network to another 133 peers. So this, simplistically, the D in the Bitcoin's case is 133. So once a block is produced or a message needs to be propagated, they send it directly to 133 peers. And in the Ethereum 1 case, it's square root of something of the network size, I think. Anyway, it's 33 connections, which means that we flood it to 33 peers. We use testground. If you don't know it, you can check it out at testground.ai. Very nice tool. And here are some messages, some results. We have a network-wide Eclipse attack. So the setup, as I said, is 20 attacker nodes to one honest node. And we have in total 5,000 peers that boot up and basically act as sinks for all the messages. They receive messages, but they don't propagate anything. And here is the CDF on the y-axis and the number and the message propagation latency on the x-axis. So we see that in case of Gossipsub, there is no effect. Basically, messages propagate as they would even if there were no attackers or close to that. And in contrast, we see that in the Ethereum and Bitcoin use case for the pubsub protocols of those networks, there is a massive impact. So messages get delayed a lot. This is done because peers see that I don't have first message deliveries, or all the other score parameters. The peers are scored. The attacker peers are scored poorly. They're pruned from the honest peers, and basically they are excluded from the network progressively, which happens quite fast because there is no effect on the propagation latency. This is another attack, the cold boot attack, which is pretty brutal, actually. What it means is we assume that the network boots. So in a blockchain network, I don't know, it's the Genesis block that is produced, and all peers start propagating the Genesis block, and then all the other subsequent ones. And we assume that the network is attacked from the get-go. And therefore, you have all the Sybils that get in there, build their own meshes. They connect to honest peers. Honest peers try to connect to others, but in most cases, they would be connected to Sybils anyway because they outnumber them, and so on. So this is pretty, hardcore attack, let's say. This is one case. The other case is when the network is under attack and a new honest node wants to onboard the network. They're going to go and get most likely connected to Sybil nodes, right? So this is another case where you boot the network, you onboard the network, and the network is under attack. Again, we see that in the case of Ethereum, there is lots of delay. The Bitcoin is performing a little bit better here because of the flooding that it does, because it's connected to so many peers. So the ratio of honest to attacker nodes needs to be much higher in order to have an effect. And Gossipsub basically, again, there is an impact, like it goes above a second, but still much less than 6 seconds, or the effect is generally much less. In the cold boot attack, that's an interesting graph. You see, this is the mesh size as we see it there, and that's the number, basically, the number of honest peers are in blue, and the number of attacker peers are with this dashed orange line. And we see that in the beginning, although for the average peer, they are connected to 12 or 10 or 8 attacker nodes, progressively the honest peers are starting pruning their connections to attacker peers, and in the beginning they are connected to 0 other honest nodes. They progressively go and take over the network and only maintain connections with other honest nodes. So that's interesting to show that even if there are attackers in the network, progressively due to the score function, the Gossipsub protocol is going to achieve like connections to honest nodes only. And finally, the covert flash attack is another tricky one where the attackers, the Sybil nodes, would enter the network. They would behave normally until at some point they snap their behavior, become and attack the network. But by that point, they have already built a good reputation, a good score. So other peers are looking at them and they're not pruning connections. So they are well embedded into the network until a moment that they turn their behavior and basically sibyl the network and try to eclipse the network. Again, the effect is seen on Gossipsub, but again, it's well below the 6-second deadline that we wanted to have, whereas in case of Ethereum and Bitcoin, this goes much more until the message is eventually propagated. And I think that, yeah, these are the results. In the paper, there are many more scenarios that we have for many more attacks. And yeah, this has been a very exciting study, because if you look at the related literature of pubsub protocols, in most of the cases, any security-related mechanisms are not done at the protocol level. They are kind of integrated into the infrastructure. There are other like application-specific ones, the application that is building on top of the pubsub protocol and so on. And yeah, this has been the first study where we've put some mitigation strategies into the pubsub protocol itself. So it's been a fun ride, yeah, and it seems to be working. So great news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yiannis. Already questions, candidates. Guys, make it quick. We're late.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I have a question about the scoring system and the tests that you made. So the honest peers will eventually prune the bad peers in your test cases. Do you have any idea if the pruned peers are totally excluded from the network? So if there is a new transaction, as an example, the bad peers will not receive that at all?
Yeah, so that's the intention. We don't have a clear visibility in the network, and I don't know, hopefully there hasn't been any attack in the Filecoin network. or if there has been, it was mitigated without us even noticing, so that would be great news. So this is the purpose of this slide, of this diagram here. Those nodes that are kind of gossip only would be the bad nodes, the attacker nodes, that progressively everyone else will disconnect from them. They might still gossip to them, but those nodes have got very little chance of being up to date and being able to actually disrupt the network in any way.
Yeah, so
the answer is yes, basically. They should be disconnected from every node in the network and kind of progressively excluded.
So your network visualization in the end with your test case, it would be the 5K nodes dividing by the 20 bad nodes? Did you understand?
The actual network is going to be not 5,000 nodes, but 5,000 nodes divided by 20 or something.
That's
eventually, yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for the talk, Yiannis. Can you go back to the scoring function? So there is one parameter, I think it was P6. Yes, that is interesting. So, for example, we have been working with Ethereum Foundation on Ethereum 2, and we have been talking with staking pools like Lido, Kraken, Coinbase, and so on and so forth. And they actually spin thousands of validators on the same physical node.
Right.
And then maybe in those situations, the parameter 6 here could be an issue. In that you could actually score bad legitimate users that are doing this kind of behavior. So I was thinking that perhaps it would be interesting to see if you could add a coefficient in front of each parameter so that different protocols could try to optimize for the specific use case. Yeah.
Yeah, so this exists. There is a weight in front of every parameter. That's one thing. The second thing is that that's the base protocol, and according to the use case or the network, things can be used at will. So, for example, if that would be the case, this parameter could be completely excluded from the function. The rest of it would still work. Or another way I could think about it, which would make it more secure, so as to speak, is to whitelist some those nodes that you know they're big clients or whatever, they are whitelisted, and then you still keep the parameter for cases where there is an attack to the network.
Thanks. And wait, Anton. Okay, way too many questions.
Okay, I have two questions. First is, does the topology of the network, because you're pruning and grafting network, does it stabilizers over at some point, or does it changes all the time?
No, I mean it should generally be stable unless there are events that would trigger pruning and then subsequent grafting. I wouldn't expect that unless there is an attack, this would change too drastically. Yeah.
Okay, and second is the IP address collection. You can have multiple IP addresses on the same physical host. Like you could have a range on the same host, or you can have a big IPv6 range on the same host. So it wouldn't prevent it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess the cost is still higher if you want to have multiple addresses. So it's always easier to spin up, like, because we're talking about a huge number of nodes. Like for example, as a benchmark, I don't know how many storage providers there are in the Filecoin network. I think it's a few thousand. So if you wanted to have a good attack to this network, you would need in the order of, I don't know, 100,000. So it would make it more difficult to have 100,000 different IP addresses than having many in one IP address. But it's totally possible. I agree.
Hi, great talk, thank you. And do you have any kind of attacks that exist where an attacker can make the score of an honest peer decrease? Like, I don't know, make an honest peer be banned by the network?
Right, so every peer is keeping a score which is its own view of the behavior of other peers, right? So this is not shared. And because it is not shared, it cannot influence others. So that's one thing. The second thing, which I guess is what you're asking, is if you as an attacker can make me look to others as a bad peer, like delay my messages or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that would be the main part of the Eclipse attack or the censorship attack, where, you are behaving. So in the censorship attack, what we did is that, again, there are CBUs, but the attacker is behaving correctly with regard to every other node apart from one or a few whose messages basically it drops and it doesn't propagate. So in that case, yes, if that node is surrounded by other nodes, then it's going to be eclipsed in itself, actually. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yiannis, again. Guys, if you have more questions for Yiannis, you're going to take them during the next coffee break. So see you very soon for our next presentation from Max and Martin in 5-10 minutes.
Thanks, everyone.